Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie Ben-Hur, 1959, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. Long before CGI chariots roared across synthetic battlefields, before digital crowds cheered on weightless gladiators, there was Ben-Hur, a thunderous, monumental cinematic colossus that galloped into theaters in 1959 and redefined what movies could be. Crafted with scale, spirit, and unflinching ambition, it wasn't just a film, it was a moment in film history. The kind of moment that doesn't whisper itself into memory, but crashes down like a rolling chariot wheel over sand and stone. Directed by William Wyler and starring the indomitable Charlton Heston, Ben-Hur didn't just win 11 Academy Awards. It carved them into granite, setting a standard that would echo through generations of epic filmmaking. This is the story of Judah Ben-Hur, a prince of Jerusalem, whose life is shattered by betrayal, driven by vengeance, and ultimately transformed by faith. But that's only the scaffolding. Within that frame lives a sweeping tale of revolution and redemption, of intimate revenge wrapped in divine destiny. It's a story that roams from the opulent courts of Roman elites to the raw dust of slave galleys, from sun-scorched arenas to the foot of the crucifixion, tethering the personal to the profound in ways that still resonate over 6 decades later. When the film begins, Judah is a nobleman, dignified and proud, with strong ties to both his heritage and his friend, Messala, a Roman officer recently returned to Jerusalem. Their reunion is warm but brittle, laced with the tension of diverging ideologies. Messala now serves Rome, and Judah, fiercely protective of his people, refuses to betray his homeland. And then comes the crack. An accidental act, an innocent mistake, sparks the fury of empire. During a Roman parade, a loose tile falls from Judah's home, nearly striking the governor. Messala, quick to act and quicker to cast blame, condemns Judah for attempted assassination. It's not justice. It's strategy. A message. Stripped of his title, torn from his mother and sister, Judah is shackled and dragged through the sand, forced to endure the brutal journey into slavery aboard a Roman warship. It's here, chained below deck in a world of oars and sweat, that the noble prince begins to die, and something far more dangerous is born in his place. The scenes in the galley are harsh, relentless. You can almost hear the crack of the overseer's whip, feel the trembling rhythm of the drums as they dictate the pace of suffering. But fate, as it often does in stories this grand, is not finished with Judah Ben-Hur. During a violent sea battle, a visceral, pulse-quickening sequence that stands even today as a benchmark for practical effects, Judah breaks free, saves a Roman consul named Quintus Arrius, and is ultimately adopted into Roman society. In a twist that only epic storytelling can pull off with such emotional payoff, the fallen prince becomes a champion of the empire that tried to destroy him. But even in Rome, dressed in robes and praised in marble halls, Judah's heart remains tethered to the dust and pain of Jerusalem. He hasn't forgotten. Not his betrayal. Not his family. And certainly not Messala. And so, he returns. What follows is one of the most anticipated reunions in cinematic history. When Judah and Messala face each other again, years older and forever changed, the tension is volcanic. Messala has risen to power, but Judah now carries the kind of calm forged in fire. Their exchange is chilling, civil on the surface but brimming with unspoken venom. Judah demands the truth. What happened to his mother and sister? Messala answers not with kindness, but cruelty. And so, the path to revenge is carved. And it leads, inevitably, to the chariot race. Even people who've never seen Ben-Hur know about this sequence. The Roman arena. The thunder of hooves. The swirl of dust. The gleaming, bladed wheels. Shot over 5 weeks on a specially constructed track with no visual effects and real, galloping horses, it remains one of the greatest action sequences ever committed to film. But it's not just spectacle, it's emotion. As Judah and Messala charge forward, wheel to wheel, what unfolds isn't just sport. It's war. It's history colliding. It's justice, vengeance, and destiny all roaring through every corner of the Colosseum. And it ends with wreckage. Messala falls. Literally. His body is crushed beneath the hooves of his own ambition. And yet, even in his final moments, he spits cruelty, revealing that Judah's mother and sister live, but they've been cast out, lepers, hidden in the valley of the lepers. Judah finds them. But they refuse to let him see their disfigurement, ashamed, broken. And in that moment, the heart of the story finally breaks open. Because Ben-Hur isn't just about vengeance. It's about something far greater. It's about the fragile, complicated path to forgiveness. Threaded throughout the story is another, quieter but no less powerful. The story of a carpenter's son from Nazareth. We only see glimpses of him, never hear his name. But his presence looms like a quiet beacon. Early on, when Judah collapses from thirst during his forced march to the sea, a stranger offers him water. No one else dares. No one else even looks. But the stranger does. And later, in the final act, when Jerusalem is darkened by crucifixions, Judah watches from the crowd as that same man carries his cross. And suddenly, Judah's rage begins to fall away. It's subtle, the transformation. Not in words, but in eyes, in posture, in stillness. The moment the sky darkens, when lightning strikes and the temple curtain is torn, the weight Judah has carried for years finally lifts. Not because his enemies were defeated, but because he let go. Because revenge, in the end, gave him nothing. But forgiveness, that gave him back his soul. Ben-Hur isn't just a historical drama. It's a mosaic of ideas. Freedom, faith, empire, resistance. It tells us that justice without compassion can curdle into hatred. That strength means little without purpose. And that sometimes the only way to truly win is to surrender the very thing you've clung to most. The film teases these truths not through grand speeches, but through silence, through visuals, through glances that linger a second too long. It takes its time. It lets the story breathe. And in doing so, it creates something rare, an epic that moves with the pace of myth, yet lands with the intimacy of a confession. And even now, after all these years, Ben-Hur continues to echo. Its influence can be seen in everything from Gladiator to Braveheart, from Spielberg's sweeping wide shots to Nolan's obsession with time and consequence. But nothing quite matches its gravity, its raw, physical grandeur, its staggering human weight. It's a film that doesn't just entertain, it endures. So if you haven't yet experienced it, let yourself be pulled in. Let the dust of the arena coat your lungs. Let the chains clink against your skin. Let the wheels spin and the hooves thunder, and feel what cinema was always meant to be. This isn't just a movie. It's a reckoning. And if you want more stories like this, more epic journeys, more hidden truths, more cinematic deep dives that unearth what lies beneath the surface, then you know what to do. Like this video. Subscribe to our channel. Because the stories are still out there. And we're just getting started. The sun rises over Jerusalem, and with it, the promise of peace. A city caught between the distant thunder of Roman conquest and the slow-burning tension of occupied hearts. In this moment, Judah Ben-Hur is still whole. He walks the stone halls of his family estate with the air of a prince, respected, revered, a man whose name carries meaning not just in coin, but in honor. His family, though scarred by the times, is intact. His home, though watched by Roman eyes, still breathes with ancient dignity. And then, like a shadow returning from the past, comes Messala. Once a friend, now a Roman officer. Once a brother in spirit, now cloaked in red and draped in empire. Their reunion is warm, touched with laughter, their memories still flickering like candlelight. They speak of youth, of races and swords, of shared boyhoods running through the streets of Jerusalem. But beneath their smiles, the air already thickens. Messala has come not just to embrace his past, but to enforce Rome's future. He asks for loyalty. Judah hesitates. What Messala wants is simple. Names. The names of Jews who whisper of rebellion, who gather in secret, who resist Roman rule. But Judah will not betray his people, not even for his oldest friend. And with that refusal, a fracture splits wide open. The air grows colder. Their handshake lingers too long. When Messala leaves the Hur estate, something unspoken has shifted. The betrayal hasn't happened yet, but the stage is set. Soon, the moment arrives. A Roman governor marches through Jerusalem in ceremonial pride, and from the high balcony of the Hur residence a loose tile falls. A freak accident. A simple mistake. It strikes no one, but in the charged climate of occupation, even accidents demand blood. Soldiers storm the home. Judah's pleas fall on deaf ears. Messala watches in silence. And then he speaks, not as a friend, but as a Roman. He condemns Judah, not because he believes him guilty, but because he needs to send a message. The cruelty isn't random. It's strategic. Judah is dragged from his home, shackled. His mother and sister are arrested. His house, once a place of laughter and light, falls into silence. In a heartbeat, his world is gone. He is no longer a prince. He is a prisoner. And the road ahead promises no justice. Stripped of dignity, Judah is marched through the desert, chained to a line of criminals, paraded like a trophy of empire. Dust coats his skin. His lips crack from thirst. Roman guards mock him. The crowd turns away. No one will help. Until he collapses. Until, from the crowd, a man steps forward. A carpenter. A stranger. He kneels, offers Judah water. Their eyes meet. No words are exchanged. But the gesture, the kindness, it marks something. A moment Judah will not forget. Eventually, Judah reaches the galley. A Roman warship. A floating prison. Here, chained to a bench deep below deck, Judah becomes another number. Another body to row. The light is dim. The air thick with sweat and despair. The rhythm of the drums sets the pace of his torment. 4 years he rows. Rows until his body hardens, until the world narrows to wood and salt and the whip of the overseer. The Prince of Jerusalem disappears. What remains is something colder. Sharper. A man shaped by pain and purpose. And then, as the gods of fate would have it, the ship is thrown into battle. The sea explodes in chaos, enemy fire, crashing timbers, screams swallowed by waves. The galley rocks and burns. Judah is knocked free, the chains torn loose by impact. As others drown, he swims. He finds the Roman commander, Quintus Arrius, trapped beneath debris. And in that moment, in a choice that defines him, Judah saves the man who represents the very empire that enslaved him. They drift together, pulled from the wreckage by a passing Roman vessel. And just like that, Judah's life shifts once more. Gratitude, in the Roman world, can be a powerful thing. Arrius adopts Judah, gives him a name, gives him a sword, gives him standing in Rome. In the empire's great arenas, Judah becomes a charioteer, a warrior, a man whispered about in corridors and celebrated in the stands. But even surrounded by marble and gold, Judah never forgets. The chain around his neck may be gone, but the weight in his chest remains. He dreams of Jerusalem, of his mother and sister, of the betrayal that broke him. And so, when the time comes, when his name has weight again, Judah chooses not comfort, but return. He sails back to the land of his birth, back to the city where his life was taken. He walks the streets of Jerusalem not as a prince, not as a slave, but as something in between. A ghost looking for the pieces of a past still hidden in shadows, he finds Esther, the daughter of a family servant, now a woman, now a voice of tenderness in a world that has offered him none. She tells him the truth, or what she knows of it. His mother and sister were imprisoned, their fate uncertain. But hope remains. And then, Judah confronts Messala. Time has changed them both, but the wound between them is still raw. Messala is more powerful now, commanding, smug, untouchable. But Judah stands before him with something he never had before, clarity. He asks for answers. Messala gives none. The meeting simmers, almost explodes. Judah leaves with fire in his eyes. It is then that the wheels begin to turn. Messala has everything to lose. Judah, nothing. And as rumors of a grand chariot race begin to swirl, an event that will gather the eyes of Jerusalem, the pride of Rome, and the honor of its champions, both men know that it will not be just a race. It will be reckoning. Because Ben-Hur is not just a story of revenge or redemption. It's a story of return. And as Judah steps back into the dust of his homeland, cloaked in silence, carrying the weight of years, you feel it. The storm is just beginning. The arena is massive. A coliseum carved out of stone and legacy, where sand remembers every hoofbeat, every fall, every scream swallowed by the roar of the crowd. The chariots are drawn up like instruments of war, wooden wheels sharpened, horses snorting, reins wound tight in fists hardened by vengeance and time. And among them, Judah Ben-Hur. No longer just a man. No longer a prince or a slave. He is something more dangerous. He is a man who has returned not for glory, but for justice. The crowd chants names. The emperor watches from his high box. The racers eye each other like predators. But all of Judah's attention rests on one figure, Messala. Once his closest friend. Now his enemy. Draped in imperial pride, confident, cruel. His chariot is outfitted with spikes on the wheels, a deadly twist, illegal by moral standards, but Messala knows morality holds no sway in Rome's shadow. He means not just to win, but to destroy. The horn sounds. And the race begins. Hooves thunder. Sand explodes beneath the wheels. The camera, fluid and unflinching, captures chaos with ballet-like precision. The chariots collide, scrape, swerve. Men are thrown, trampled. Horses shriek, wild and furious. But through it all, Judah holds steady. His grip is iron. His gaze locked forward. He doesn't fight for applause. He fights for a truth too long denied. Then the moment comes. Messala edges toward Judah, his spiked wheels slicing the air. He grins, the way men grin when they think fate bends to their will. But Judah leans in, commands his horses with a whisper of movement. At the final turn, as Messala tries to crush him against the inner wall, Judah swerves. Messala's wheel strikes stone. His chariot shatters in a cascade of splinters. He's thrown, dragged, crushed beneath the wreckage. Judah doesn't look back. He crosses the finish line as the crowd erupts. Victory. But not triumph. Because victory doesn't bring healing. Messala lies broken, bloodied, dying. And in a final cruel twist, he spits out the truth like venom. Judah's mother and sister still live, but they are lepers. Cast out. Hidden in the valley of the lepers. Messala's revenge is not in the arena, but in the look on Judah's face as the words sink in. The real pain isn't what was taken, but what's still out there, twisted by suffering. Judah's return to the leper colony is slow, silent. The air is heavy with dust and despair. Esther, now more than just a comfort, becomes his guide. Together, they move through the forgotten. Faces covered, limbs frail. And there, in the shadows, he sees them, his mother and sister. Alive. But transformed. They don't recognize him at first. And when they do, they turn away, ashamed. Their illness, a mark of Rome's cruelty and time's decay. But for Judah, the moment is both a wound and a balm. He has found them. The part of him that was lost is here again, breathing. Broken, but not gone. He tries to bring them back, to heal. But the sickness isn't just in the body, it's in the spirit. The city has no place for them now. And Judah, who once rode into a Roman arena and defied an empire, now finds himself powerless. And so the story shifts. It's no longer about revenge. It's about grace. Because woven into Judah's story, quietly, almost invisibly, has always been another. The man who gave him water in the desert. The one whose face we never fully see. The one whose presence radiates not with power, but with stillness. The Nazarene. His words ripple through the city. Mercy. Forgiveness. Love for enemies. These ideas confound the rulers, and they call for silence. The cross is raised. Judah watches as the carpenter he once barely knew now walks through the streets, carrying the weight of a world on his back. The crowd mocks. The soldiers shout. And still the Nazarene walks. Up the hill. Toward the end. Judah follows, not because he understands, but because he feels. Something in him moves. Not the vengeance. Not the hatred. But the part that still remembers what it is to believe. As the sky darkens, as the earth trembles and the storm breaks, Judah stands at the foot of the crucifixion. Blood mingles with rain. And somewhere in that silence, in that moment between agony and eternity, something inside him shifts. The man who once carried chains now feels them break. The man who once fought for revenge now finds it hollow. When he returns to his mother and sister, the storm has passed. The world is quiet, and in that quiet, a miracle. Their illness, the leprosy, has lifted. Not with spectacle, not with fanfare, but like fog dissolving with the morning sun. And Judah? He is reborn. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. The way he walks, the way he looks at Esther, the way he holds his family, it tells everything. He has let go of hate, of loss, of the burden that nearly consumed him. The chariots are still. The empire still rules. But within him, a different kind of kingdom has risen. The kind not built with stone, but with peace. And as the story fades to its final frame, there's no grand declaration. No trumpet fanfare. Just a man, once broken, now whole. And the knowledge that sometimes the greatest victories are the ones you never see. Judah Ben-Hur begins as a man of stature, of pride, of tradition. He's deeply woven into the fabric of Jerusalem, not just as a prince in title, but as a spiritual symbol of heritage, loyalty, and leadership. When we first meet him, he's poised, calm, a figure of composure in a world slowly tightening under the Roman fist. His house is large, his servants loyal, and his eyes carry the quiet confidence of someone who believes, with some certainty, in the righteousness of the world around him. But Judah's strength, at least in the beginning, is also his flaw. He believes that integrity alone is enough to shield him from injustice. And then Messala returns. Messala isn't just an old friend. He's a mirror, a reflection of what Judah might have become if he had chosen empire over blood. Their relationship is steeped in nostalgia, but cracked by tension. When Messala embraces Judah, it's with warmth, yes, but also calculation. Messala is no longer the boy who raced chariots in the hills. He's a soldier now, an officer. And in Rome, loyalty to the state supersedes loyalty to any friend, to any past. When Judah refuses to name the Jewish dissidents, when he draws a line in the sand between his people and Roman ambition, Messala doesn't argue. He retaliates. And in doing so, he awakens something inside Judah that neither man fully understands yet. The betrayal doesn't just wound Judah, it redefines him. The transformation that follows is one of the most powerful arcs ever captured on film. Judah doesn't fall into despair in the traditional sense. He doesn't beg or break. He endures. The man who rose in the galley beneath the warship isn't a hero yet, he's a ghost. Stripped of name, dignity, and even hope, he becomes a creature of silence and muscle. But somewhere in the darkness, the ember remains. And then, remarkably, Judah saves a Roman. That decision, to rescue the very kind of man who once destroyed his life, is not just a moment of action. It's our first glimpse of the man he could become. Quintus Arrius sees it too. He sees something in Judah that isn't just strength. It's restraint, compassion, buried under years of injustice. In Rome, Judah begins to reclaim his body, his voice. He learns to command, to control. But he never forgets what was taken from him. When he returns to Jerusalem, he carries himself not like a broken man, but like a storm. He's not just seeking vengeance. He's seeking reckoning. And yet, as he navigates the city's politics, as he reunites with Esther, as he confronts Messala and races toward the climax of the chariot arena, we see him grappling with something deeper. He's not just at war with his enemy. He's at war with what revenge has made him. Esther becomes the quiet voice that reminds him of who he used to be. She's not just a love interest. She's his anchor. Where Judah is all flame and fury, Esther is water and light. Her strength isn't loud, but it's undeniable. She defies societal norms by speaking truth to him, gently but firmly. When Judah is ready to burn everything down to find his mother and sister, she urges him to wait, to listen, to believe in something greater than revenge. Her character, often overlooked, is the film's emotional spine. Through her, we see the possibility of healing, not as an easy path, but as a choice. Her faith isn't naive. It's revolutionary. She sees the rise of something new in Jerusalem, not just rebellion, but redemption. Then there's Messala. To understand Ben-Hur, you have to understand that Messala isn't a villain in the traditional sense. He's not evil for the sake of evil. He's a man who chose power over principle. A man who loved Judah, once, but loved Rome more. His downfall isn't just physical, it's philosophical. He believes the world can be ordered through strength, through fear, through law. When Judah refuses to cooperate, it isn't just disobedience, it's betrayal. And so he lashes out with the kind of cruelty that only comes from love turned sour. Messala is the tragedy of the film. Because even in his most triumphant moments, he is hollow. His armor shines, but it hides rot. His face smiles, but it masks insecurity. When he dies in the aftermath of the chariot race, it's not just defeat, it's despair. Even as he gasps out the truth about Judah's family, it isn't a moment of redemption. It's a final stab, a last attempt to hold control. But he's already lost. To Judah, to Rome, to himself. And what of Judah's mother and sister? They represent more than personal loss. They symbolize the innocence that is always sacrificed in systems of oppression. Their transformation, from respected women to outcast lepers, is a condemnation of a society that discards the weak, that hides suffering behind walls and valleys. They endure their torment with dignity, refusing even to show themselves to Judah when he finds them. Their silence speaks volumes. They are not characters of action, but of weight. Their presence, though often quiet, is a reminder of everything at stake. And when their healing comes, after the crucifixion, it's not just physical. It's cosmic. It signifies the lifting of all that pain, all that shame. We also must look at Quintus Arrius, the Roman commander whose life Judah saves. He is the counterpoint to Messala. Where Messala uses power to dominate, Arrius uses it to uplift. His decision to adopt Judah isn't just gratitude, it's recognition. Arrius sees in Judah the kind of strength Rome cannot manufacture. A quiet nobility that transcends class or title. His character, brief though it may seem, is a crucial turning point in Judah's journey. He proves that not all Romans are cruel. That not all power is corrupt. That some bridges can be built across the bloodied divide. And at the margins, silent but ever-present, is the carpenter. He is not named. He is not shown in full. But his presence hums like a background melody. When he gives water to Judah in the desert, he becomes the first act of mercy the fallen prince has received in years. That single moment, that cup of water, becomes the seed of change. It doesn't bloom immediately. It waits, lingers, grows in the quiet corners of Judah's soul. And when Judah sees him again, walking, bloodied, burdened by a cross, that seed erupts into light. Because this man, this silent figure who never lifts a sword, changes Judah more profoundly than any enemy or battle ever could. By the film's final moments, Judah has changed in ways that cannot be undone. His hands, once clenched with rage, are now open. His eyes, once narrowed with fury, now glisten with understanding. He has lost almost everything, and yet somehow he has found more. The arc of Judah Ben-Hur is not from weakness to strength. It's from vengeance to grace, from fire to stillness, from prince to man. And all around him, the characters orbit like stars around that transformation, each one reflecting a different path he might have taken, each one pushing him toward a truth not found in chariots or swords or crowns, but in forgiveness. It's what makes Ben-Hur endure. Not just the scale, not just the spectacle, but the humanity. The way it dares to ask, what if letting go is stronger than holding on? And what if love, quiet, relentless love, is the most powerful force of all? There are movies, and then there are legends. And Ben-Hur, the 1959 cinematic colossus that rumbled into theaters like a chariot at full charge, is nothing short of mythic, both on the screen and behind it. Its story of vengeance, redemption, and divine forgiveness gripped the world, but what happened beyond the camera was often just as epic. Strange coincidences, near disasters, and production tales so surreal they feel scripted themselves all wove into the legacy of a film that remains, even now, one of Hollywood's most fascinating creations. Because what it took to bring Ben-Hur to life wasn't just money or vision, it was a kind of madness. And a whole lot of miracles. Let's begin with the size. Because before a single frame of Ben-Hur was shot, its very existence became a logistical riddle. MGM was hemorrhaging money in the 1950s, desperate for a hit that would save the studio from collapse. Their answer? Go big. Biblically big. They poured an unprecedented $15 million into the production, a towering sum at the time, and handed the reins to director William Wyler, a man known for his perfectionism and an eye that missed nothing. What they didn't know was that this choice would lead them into one of the most ambitious, chaotic, and downright surreal productions in film history. First, the cast and crew set up base in Rome, using the legendary Cinecittà Studios. But calling it a studio doesn't quite do it justice. They essentially built a city. Over 300 sets were constructed, including a full-scale replica of ancient Jerusalem. The chariot race arena alone was 1,500 feet long and took 1,000 workers over a year to build. It used enough sand to cover a football field, and then some. Engineers carved it out like a stadium, surrounded by columns and arches so convincing that some visitors thought they'd stumbled into ancient ruins. And then came the extras. More than 10,000 of them. Romans, Jews, soldiers, merchants, each had to be outfitted in period-accurate costumes, many of which were hand-sewn by Italian artisans. There were so many people on set that food trucks had to be imported from other regions just to feed the army. During the height of production, Cinecittà resembled a Roman military camp more than a movie lot. At one point, Wyler jokingly told a journalist that he could conquer Greece with this cast. Of course, the most iconic scene, the chariot race, deserves a chapter of its own. Forget green screens. Forget computer-generated horses or edited speed ramps. This was all real. The race sequence took over 5 weeks to film and required some of the most death-defying stunts ever captured on camera. Charlton Heston, who played Judah Ben-Hur, underwent intense training to learn how to drive a 4-horse chariot himself. He spent weeks practicing in the Italian countryside, learning how to control the wild energy of the horses without losing control, or a limb. But even with all the training, the race was dangerous. Insanely dangerous. Stuntman Joe Cannett, son of legendary stunt coordinator Yakima Cannett, was tasked with doubling for Heston during the most perilous sections of the race. And one of those stunts didn't go exactly as planned. During a pivotal moment, Joe was thrown from the chariot and launched into the air, barely managing to hold on as the horses trampled past him. It wasn't in the script, but it looked so real, so terrifying, that Wyler kept it in the final cut. Audiences gasped, believing it was Heston himself. And truth be told, it nearly was Joe's last stunt. He walked away with only a bruised chin. A miracle, given the force of that fall. Another strange twist? One of the horses used in the race went rogue during filming. A massive white stallion, named Altair, broke from formation and bolted across the arena, scattering extras and nearly causing a multi-chariot pileup. Wranglers chased him for over 15 minutes before he was caught. Altair was then retired early, living the rest of his days in the Roman countryside. But cast members still whispered about the day the ghost horse tried to escape. And speaking of legends, there's the mysterious case of the Phantom Chariot. According to several crew accounts, during one early morning shoot, before the sun had fully risen, a chariot was seen parked in the arena, even though no one had brought it there. When the crew returned with lights and cameras, it was gone. It became an inside joke on set. The ghost of ancient Rome had come to supervise. While the film was rooted in biblical times, it had its share of modern mysteries too. For example, one of the most unusual challenges came during the naval battle sequence. For this scene, Wyler wanted the ships to feel enormous and the waves to crash with fury. The solution? He built giant Roman galleys in a massive tank. But instead of filming in warm weather, production was delayed, and the scenes were shot during a cold Roman winter. The water temperature dropped so low that several extras suffered hypothermia. To keep the actors from freezing, crew members filled the ships with hidden heaters, one of which shorted out and caused a small fire. No injuries, thankfully, but for a moment it looked like the whole scene might literally go up in smoke. Wyler himself, a man known for shooting dozens of takes per scene, was reportedly driving his actors to exhaustion. Charlton Heston once joked that Wyler wouldn't stop rolling until an actor was emotionally broken or physically unconscious. But behind the camera, Wyler was quietly navigating the immense pressure of directing a film with religious themes, political overtones, and a production scale so massive it felt like steering a battleship. Interestingly, despite the spiritual undertones of the film, Wyler, who was Jewish, was deeply cautious about how he portrayed Christ. In fact, one of the film's most powerful choices was to never show Jesus' face. He appears only in silhouette, in the corner of frames, with a kind of quiet reverence. This creative decision wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. Wyler wanted the audience to feel his presence, not be distracted by an actor's portrayal. It worked. That subtle restraint made his moments, giving Judah water, walking to the crucifixion, resonate even louder. Then there were the strange injuries. Heston cracked a rib early in production, but didn't report it until months later. His stoicism, much like Judah's, became a badge of pride. Another actor broke 2 toes on set when a prop column toppled during a rehearsal. Rather than delay filming, he shot his scenes standing on a box to avoid putting weight on his foot. As for the leper scenes, those were shot at a distance, both figuratively and literally. To capture the isolation and despair of the Valley of the Lepers, Wyler filmed in the hills surrounding Rome and used long telephoto lenses to compress space and isolate the characters in visual solitude. The eerie quiet of those sequences wasn't just artistic, it reflected the somber mood on set. Extras stayed silent between takes. Crew whispered. The atmosphere changed. As one assistant director said, it was like the weight of the world settled in that valley. Not all was gloom, though. Behind the scenes, there was laughter. Heston often entertained cast and crew with impressions, especially of Wyler's gruff direction. One day, he showed up to set wearing a Roman toga, sunglasses, and a director's beret. Wyler, not known for his humor, stared at him for a beat, and then cracked a rare smile. "Get on your chariot," he said. "You're wasting my daylight." And the trivia doesn't stop. Did you know that the film's massive musical score, composed by Miklos Rasha, was the longest ever written for a film at that time? Over 3 hours of original music, blending Roman grandeur with emotional intimacy. It wasn't just background, it was a character in its own right. Rasha even traveled to Jerusalem to study ancient instruments and rhythms, infusing the film with an authenticity few ever noticed, but all felt. And what about the Oscars? Ben-Hur didn't just win, it conquered. 11 Academy Awards. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Cinematography. It held that record for nearly 40 years, tied only later by Titanic and The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. It was proof that sometimes, when all the madness lines up, a miracle can happen on celluloid. And perhaps the strangest fact of all? It saved MGM. A studio on the verge of bankruptcy, literally selling off backlots to stay afloat, suddenly found itself at the center of the cinematic universe. Ben-Hur didn't just revive the studio's fortunes. It became the cornerstone of its legacy. Without it, we might never have seen many of the films that followed. In the end, the story of Ben-Hur behind the scenes is as rich, strange, and unforgettable as the tale it told on screen. A tale of accidents that became masterpieces. Of ghosts that rode chariots. Of ships that nearly sank. Of extras who became armies. Of a cast that gave everything. And of a director who, through force of will and a little cinematic magic, brought a biblical world roaring to life. It was messy. It was massive. And it was nothing short of a miracle. Some films entertain. Others endure. But Ben-Hur did more than that. It transcended. It became myth, not only through its towering visuals or groundbreaking scope, but through the richness of its moral architecture. The events that shape the spine of Ben-Hur are not just cinematic set pieces, they're ideological battlefields. They are the crucibles through which characters are melted down and remade. And through those moments, the film speaks with a voice that echoes across decades, quietly, at times thunderously, but always with purpose. To understand the film's deeper resonance, we begin not in the arena, but in a room. Two men, once friends, now separated by ideals. The early confrontation between Judah Ben-Hur and Messala is more than just narrative conflict, it's a philosophical schism. Judah represents rooted identity, faith, and familial allegiance. Messala, now Rome's arm in Jerusalem, brings the empire's promise of power, control, and unity through subjugation. Their collision is intimate and universal. The tension between personal loyalty and political allegiance reverberates through history, and Ben-Hur captures that dissonance with a rawness that remains potent today. Critically, this scene has been dissected as a masterstroke of subtle tension. William Wyler frames their meeting with warmth. Sunlight dapples the marble, the laughter of memory clings to their words, but the dialogue dances on a blade's edge. It's been viewed as one of the most cleverly written explorations of ideological betrayal in mid-century American cinema, especially within the climate of the post-war world and the beginnings of Cold War paranoia. Critics then, and now, recognize how that scene bridges the personal and political, how, in 10 quiet minutes, the seeds of war are sown. From there, the descent begins. The tile falling from the roof, seemingly accidental, is the inciting incident of Judah's undoing. But from a critical standpoint, this event serves a symbolic role. It's the fragility of fate, the randomness of ruin. One misstep, one uncontrollable moment, and a man's entire world collapses. Messala seizes it, not as justice, but as opportunity. For viewers, this moment is harrowing, not because of the action itself, but because of the silence that surrounds it. The crowd doesn't protest. The guards don't question. The system, Rome's justice, moves forward like a machine. Judah's arrest, his separation from his family, and the forced march to the slave galleys become a study in dehumanization. From a thematic lens, this is the crucible moment. Critics have long pointed to the visual language of these scenes, the way Wyler's camera lingers on the dust, the sweat, the chafing metal of the chains. It's not just a physical journey. It's the death of identity. And in that death, we see a transformation that transcends era or culture, a man being emptied so that something new can take root. Then, there is the water. The scene in which Jesus offers Judah a drink in the desert remains, arguably, the film's quietest miracle. Not just in what happens, but in how it happens. We never see Jesus' face. There's no music swell. No dialogue. Just the image of a man, broken and thirsty, receiving kindness from a stranger. Film historians have praised this choice as a masterclass in restraint. By refusing to overplay the moment, Wyler allows it to glow with authenticity. From a symbolic perspective, this act becomes the first spark of Judah's eventual redemption, a whisper of grace before the long night of rage. Critically, the scene has been read through multiple lenses. Religious scholars applaud it as one of the most reverent portrayals of Christ in mainstream cinema. Secular critics view it as a universal humanist gesture, compassion without context, mercy without motive. And both readings coexist harmoniously, a testament to the film's layered design. The naval battle, while a stunning technical achievement, also holds symbolic depth. Judah's decision to save Quintus Arrius isn't just the action of a good man, it's the first time he chooses humanity over hatred. Many critics cite this moment as the pivot of his character arc. Until then, Judah has been surviving. Here, for the first time, he acts. And in doing so, he disrupts the narrative Rome has written for him. Arrius adopts him not just as a son, but as a citizen. It's a perverse kind of rebirth. Judah, once a prince, now becomes a Roman through the very man he could have let drown. This transformation leads us to one of the film's most iconic moments, the chariot race. No discussion of Ben-Hur would be complete without examining this thunderous centerpiece, not only as spectacle, but as storytelling. Critically, the race is a ballet of fury. Every wheel rotation is a heartbeat. Every crash, a reckoning. But beneath the dust and adrenaline, it is a microcosm of the film's central theme. The collision between vengeance and justice. The race is not about sport, it is war in motion. Judah rides not to win, but to wound. Messala, cruel and smiling, enters the arena armed with spiked wheels, symbols of deceit and bloodlust. Every frame of this sequence has been studied by film theorists for its pacing, composition, and practical ingenuity. But more importantly, it's been dissected for its emotional economy. There are no wasted shots. No verbal exposition. The hatred, the memory, the pain, they play out entirely through action. And when Messala falls, crushed by the machine he constructed, it is more than poetic. It is inevitable. And yet, as critics have long pointed out, the real twist comes not with Judah's victory, but with what follows. Messala's final act, revealing the fate of Judah's mother and sister, recasts the triumph in ash. There is no satisfaction. No justice. Just another loss. Judah's quest for revenge has yielded only more suffering. And this, thematically, is where Ben-Hur elevates itself. It refuses to end on the note of glory. It pulls the audience deeper into the moral complexity of vengeance. The Valley of the Lepers, too, has been critically viewed as the film's emotional nadir. Here, the weight of despair is complete. Judah's mother and sister, symbols of innocence and memory, now hide their faces. The disease, a visual metaphor for social rejection and unseen trauma, haunts every frame. Wyler's choice to shoot these scenes in isolation, with minimal dialogue, enhances the sensation of loss. Critics often reference these moments as the soul of the film, quiet, devastating, and honest. And then comes the crucifixion. It's a moment that divides time. The stranger who gave water now carries a cross. The crowd that once ignored Judah now jeers another broken man. The visual parallels are unmistakable. As Judah watches, we watch with him, not just a man dying, but a worldview unraveling. In that silence, something breaks inside him. But it is not the kind of break that destroys, it is the kind that frees. From a critical standpoint, this is the film's most radical act. It proposes that redemption doesn't come through conquest, but through surrender. That power isn't found in chariots or swords, but in compassion. Judah, once defined by strength, now falls to his knees, transformed not by bloodshed, but by love. The final scenes, in which Judah's mother and sister are healed, are often seen through symbolic lenses. Is it a miracle? A metaphor? A narrative resolution? Critics are divided, but they agree on its emotional truth. The healing, whether divine or poetic, represents the final lifting of the burden. Judah can return to the world, not as a soldier, not as a prince, but as a man. A whole man. The impact of these events is more than historical. When the film premiered, audiences wept. Not just for the spectacle, but for what it stirred. It wasn't just a story of Rome and Judea. It was a story of the human condition, of how easily we lose ourselves in rage, and how hard, how brave, it is to choose mercy. Over the decades, Ben-Hur has been revisited, reanalyzed, reinterpreted. Some see it as religious allegory, others as political commentary. Some view it through the lens of post-war trauma, noting how Judah's journey mirrors that of soldiers returning home, broken and unsure. Others examine its gender dynamics, its representations of power and faith. But through all the lenses, one thing remains clear. Ben-Hur speaks, not in lectures, but in the dust of a racecourse, in the silence of a mother's eyes, in the cup of water offered to a stranger. Its critical legacy is vast. It remains a film studied not just for its craft, but for its conviction, because it dared to ask questions, dared to wound, and dared, most of all, to heal. To make Ben-Hur was not simply to make a film, it was to build a monument. A sprawling, dust-choked, heart-throbbing monument carved from ambition and stitched together with madness. For William Wyler and the cast and crew of this titanic production, Ben-Hur wasn't just about Rome and Jerusalem. It was about MGM's last stand, about the myth-making power of cinema, and about pushing the boundaries of what could be captured, not on a digital canvas or in a soundstage vacuum, but in the sun, in the sand, with real horses, real columns, and real stakes. And like any monument, its construction came with legends of its own, some fascinating, some absurd, all unforgettable. It began with bankruptcy. MGM, once the crown jewel of Hollywood's golden age, was in financial ruin by the mid-1950s. Its stars were fading. Its studios were quiet. The moguls decided to gamble everything on a single, massive picture. They chose a story that had already been made twice, a silent epic in 1925, and again in a shorter form during the early days of sound. But this time, they wouldn't just remake Ben-Hur. They would rebirth it. The numbers were staggering. Over $15 million allocated to the production, an unprecedented budget in its time. Over 300 sets constructed at Cinecittà Studios in Rome. A cast of thousands. A crew that included more than 1,000 craftsmen. From the first day, the film was a logistical beast. Every costume, every prop, every architectural column was built by hand. Historical accuracy wasn't just suggested, it was enforced. Ancient texts were studied. Mosaics analyzed. The hem of a tunic might be argued over for an entire afternoon. And standing at the center of this controlled chaos was William Wyler, a perfectionist of the highest order. Known for his slow, deliberate shooting style, Wyler would spend hours adjusting a single scene, often requiring 20 to 40 takes just to get a close-up right. Actors called him 90-take Wyler. The joke wasn't far from truth. Charlton Heston, cast as Judah Ben-Hur, quickly discovered that Wyler's gentle demeanor masked a ruthless attention to detail. One day, while filming a scene with intense dialogue, Heston gave what he thought was a perfect take. Wyler simply said, "Fine. Now do it again. Better." It became a rhythm. Wyler didn't want acting. He wanted truth. The result? A performance that felt carved from granite, but also alive with internal struggle. Filming began in 1958, and by then Cinecittà had been fully transformed into ancient Judea. The set was so elaborate and so large that Italian workers referred to it as La Piccola Roma, Little Rome. Walking its streets was like stepping into the past. Actors often wandered the set in costume between takes, catching their breath in the shade of massive marble arches or sipping espresso in full Roman garb. The famous chariot race, now one of the most legendary sequences in cinema history, was its own film within the film. It took over 5 weeks to shoot and cost over $1 million alone. The track was nearly a mile long. The production team sourced over 80 horses from all over Europe, hand-picking stallions for strength and temperament. Charlton Heston had to be trained as a real charioteer. 4 months before filming, he practiced with 4 horse teams, learning how to control them with nothing but a pair of leather reins and sheer force of will. There was no movie trickery here. Heston drove the chariot himself for most of the race, and when he finally turned that last corner in the film, hands white-knuckled, eyes squinting through sand and sun, he wasn't acting. He was surviving. But the most famous moment of the race, the stunt where a chariot flips and its driver is nearly crushed, was never supposed to happen. That was Joe Cannett, son of legendary stuntman Yakima Cannett, who had choreographed the sequence with military precision. In one take, Joe was thrown from the chariot, landed on the hitch bar between horses, and miraculously clung on. The crew screamed, thinking he was dead. But Joe stood up, waved, and walked it off. Wyler kept it in the film. To this day, audiences believe it was Heston performing the stunt. Joe never corrected them. Wyler, for all his control, had to contend with forces beyond even his command. The weather in Rome was unpredictable. Storms would delay shooting for days. Sets collapsed under sudden winds. At one point, a team of set designers had to rebuild part of the arena wall overnight after a downpour left it crumbling. And with thousands of extras to manage, coordinating crowd scenes became an art form in itself. Assistant directors used colored flags, whistles, even loudspeakers to get synchronized movement from people dressed as senators, slaves, and street vendors. One day, a lion broke loose from the holding area near the animal pens used for the background of the arena scenes. It wandered onto the set during a break in shooting and caused a stampede, not in the film, but in real life. Extras fled in every direction. It took over an hour to wrangle the lion back into its enclosure. Wyler's reaction? He lit a cigarette and muttered, "At least it didn't eat the hero." Costuming, too, became a kind of obsession. The film used over 400 tunics for soldiers alone, each dyed by hand to reflect status and region. One costume designer, exhausted and furious after Wyler asked for a slightly more authentic color for a centurion's cape, reportedly tossed the entire rack into a fountain and started over. The final costume count for the entire production? Over 100,000 pieces. The music of Ben-Hur, composed by Miklos Rasha, is another marvel. Rasha didn't just write a score, he composed a symphony. Over 3 hours of music, written with themes for every major character and motif. He used ancient instruments, researched modal harmonies used in the Middle East during the Roman period, and blended it with the grandeur of a Hollywood orchestra. The recording sessions were so long that musicians demanded extra pay and naps. Rasha, unwavering, stood with his baton, conducting as if possessed. It paid off. The score would go on to win an Academy Award and be studied in conservatories for decades to come. Behind the scenes, cast and crew bonded through exhaustion. Heston became a leader, respected not just for his performance but for his tireless energy. He was known to help move equipment when needed and often ran lines with extras who didn't speak English fluently. During one particularly grueling desert shoot, he reportedly gave up his tent to an elderly background actor who had collapsed from heatstroke. But there were lighter moments, too. Stephen Boyd, who played Messala, was known for his prankster streak. Between takes, he'd sneak up behind Heston with fake snakes or slip Latin phrases into scenes just to throw him off. The two actors, though rivals on screen, developed a deep mutual respect. "I had to hate him for a year," Boyd later said. "But off-camera, he was the best damn Roman I ever met." The leper scenes, filmed in the hills outside Rome, were shot in near silence. Wyler insisted on a somber atmosphere. Cast and crew wore darker clothing. Jokes were forbidden. Even the camera operators spoke in hushed tones. The result was a kind of emotional quarantine, captured in the haunting stillness of those scenes. One assistant director said it felt like they were filming inside a prayer. The crucifixion scene, filmed near the very end of production, was treated with reverence. The actor playing Jesus was never fully shown. His hands, his back, the crown of thorns, these were framed in partial shadow, lending an aura of mystery. Extras stood still between takes. The wind picked up during filming, rustling the robes of the Roman soldiers. A few in the crew, religious or not, admitted to feeling something unspoken that day. And perhaps the most touching story comes from Wyler himself. Near the final weeks of production, as the sun set over the Chariot Arena for the last time, he walked alone along the length of the track. Crews were packing up. Extras changing. But Wyler just stood, hands in his pockets, and watched the wind lift dust off the stone. "It was hell," he reportedly said. But what a beautiful hell! Ben-Hur premiered in 1959 and shattered box office records. It won 11 Academy Awards and resurrected MGM. But more than that, it became something sacred in the realm of filmmaking. A reminder that sometimes the old ways, the hard ways, can produce something eternal. And all of it, the thunder and the tears, the heat and the triumph, began with a gamble, and ended with a chariot race that would never be forgotten. Because Ben-Hur wasn't just made. It was forged. The world of Ben-Hur doesn't just unfold, it envelopes. It doesn't simply tell a story, it builds one around you. From the opening frames, where golden desert sands spill beneath distant blue skies, to the colossal grandeur of ancient cities carved into stone and shadow, the film is a masterclass in how setting and cinematic craftsmanship breathe life into myth. And in the case of this 1959 epic, that breath is deep, dust-filled, and trembling with divinity and vengeance. Wyler, for all his control, had to contend with forces beyond even his command. The weather in Rome was unpredictable. Storms would delay shooting for days. Sets collapsed under sudden winds. At one point, a team of set designers had to rebuild part of the arena wall overnight after a downpour left it crumbling. And with thousands of extras to manage, coordinating crowd scenes became an art form in itself. Assistant directors used colored flags, whistles, even loudspeakers to get synchronized movement from people dressed as senators, slaves, and street vendors. One day, a lion broke loose from the holding area near the animal pens used for the background of the arena scenes. It wandered onto the set during a break in shooting and caused a stampede, not in the film, but in real life. Extras fled in every direction. It took over an hour to wrangle the lion back into its enclosure. Wyler's reaction? He lit a cigarette and muttered, "At least it didn't eat the hero." Costuming, too, became a kind of obsession. The film used over 400 tunics for soldiers alone, each dyed by hand to reflect status and region. One costume designer, exhausted and furious after Wyler asked for a slightly more authentic color for a centurion's cape, reportedly tossed the entire rack into a fountain and started over. The final costume count for the entire production? Over 100,000 pieces. The music of Ben-Hur, composed by Miklos Rasha, is another marvel. Rasha didn't just write a score, he composed a symphony. Over 3 hours of music, written with themes for every major character and motif. He used ancient instruments, researched modal harmonies used in the Middle East during the Roman period, and blended it with the grandeur of a Hollywood orchestra. The recording sessions were so long that musicians demanded extra pay and naps. Rasha, unwavering, stood with his baton, conducting as if possessed. It paid off. The score would go on to win an Academy Award and be studied in conservatories for decades to come. Behind the scenes, cast and crew bonded through exhaustion. Heston became a leader, respected not just for his performance but for his tireless energy. He was known to help move equipment when needed and often ran lines with extras who didn't speak English fluently. During one particularly grueling desert shoot, he reportedly gave up his tent to an elderly background actor who had collapsed from heatstroke. But there were lighter moments, too. Stephen Boyd, who played Messala, was known for his prankster streak. The settings of Ben-Hur do more than stage the narrative. They speak it. Take Jerusalem, for example. Not just a city in the film, but a pulse. Wyler and his design team didn't settle for suggestion. They reconstructed ancient Jerusalem brick by weathered brick, building a city that felt alive in every frame. The narrow alleys, sun-soaked markets, and fortress walls aren't merely background. They're pressure. Their history made tactile. When Judah walks those streets as a prince early in the film, we see sunlight filtering through arches, children playing in courtyards, flags fluttering lazily from rooftops. But there's tension lurking under the warmth. Roman banners tower over doorways, soldiers patrol every open space, their armor clinking like distant thunder. The setting tells you what words do not. This is a city at odds with itself. Ancient tradition and imperial power locked in an uneasy standoff. It's no accident that Judah's fall begins within this very environment. When he's falsely accused and dragged through the city in chains, the same streets that once celebrated him now shrink around him. The walls feel taller. The stones colder. Even the light dims. Wyler uses the setting not just as a stage, but as a living force, responsive to Judah's shifting fate. Cinematographer Robert L. Surtees lets the camera linger on the cobblestones, on the slant of shadow as Judah is pulled past familiar homes now silent and shut. It's a cruel irony, betrayal playing out not in foreign lands, but in the very heart of Judah's world. Then we enter the desert. The transition is stark. From the density of the city to the desolation of the wilderness, the film opens up, literally and emotionally. The screen expands, the camera pulls back, and we are left with endless horizons. Here, Wyler uses the vast, empty landscapes to mirror Judah's spiritual and physical collapse. The scorching sun, the cracked earth, the long trail of prisoners, the desert becomes a crucible, where identity is stripped away grain by grain. You feel the heat in every frame. The color palette shifts. Where Jerusalem had warmth, this world is bleached. Washed out. Here, no comfort exists, only endurance. And then comes the galley. A ship, dark and wet and claustrophobic. After the brightness of the desert, the galley scenes slam you into silence and shadow. The camera moves low and tight, favoring close-ups of sweat-slicked faces and trembling arms. This is where Judah disappears, at least in form. The once proud prince becomes a number, a body. The set is designed with brutal simplicity. Thick wood beams, slatted light through hatches, the relentless rhythm of drums echoing off walls. This setting doesn't need detail. It needs weight. And that weight presses down on both character and viewer alike. It is in this contrast, between openness and confinement, that the film finds one of its most brilliant visual rhythms. Every new location marks a transformation, and Wyler ensures that we feel each one. The sea battle, too, uses setting to visceral effect. It's not just about crashing ships and blazing arrows, though those are spectacular in their own right. It's about chaos framed through confinement. The galley erupts in fire and water, and yet we never lose our orientation. Surtees's cinematography keeps the visuals tight but legible, letting the audience experience the panic as the slaves scramble for survival. The flames dance across sweat and steel, flickering like judgment itself. The setting becomes infernal, almost biblical, reinforcing the idea that Judah's suffering is not just punishment, it's purification. And then Rome. Here, the film swells. The architecture grows grander, the frames wider. Gold and marble dominate the palette. After the earthy tones of Jerusalem and the darkness of the galley, Rome feels otherworldly. Ornate gardens, gleaming palaces, and endless columns suggest a world not just of wealth, but of control. The city is beautiful, yes, but sterile. Too perfect. Too polished. It reflects not healing, but distraction. Judah is treated like a prince again, but the coldness of the setting tells us what the character already knows. This is not home. Wyler uses the geography of Rome to illustrate spiritual dislocation. Even in comfort, Judah cannot rest. The streets are broad but empty. The faces smiling but distant. The cinematography flattens some of the Rome scenes purposefully. Less dramatic lighting, more symmetry, signaling that while Judah's surroundings have changed, his soul has not yet begun to mend. Then, at last, we return to Jerusalem. But not the Jerusalem of before. Now, it is a city in turmoil. The atmosphere is charged. Crowds murmur of a new prophet. The color tones are richer, more shadowed. It's the same place, but spiritually altered. When Judah walks through the streets now, he is a ghost among ghosts. Wyler subtly shifts the lighting, the camera angles, to place Judah on the margins of his own world. The city he once ruled no longer recognizes him, and perhaps he no longer recognizes it. And then comes the Valley of the Lepers, one of the most haunting settings in the film. Shot in a desolate location, the valley feels like another realm. Time slows here. The air is still. The rocks jagged and unforgiving. The camera remains distant. Long lenses isolate the characters, making the figures feel small, insignificant against the barren backdrop. There are no buildings here. No temples. No symbols of man's achievement. Only the raw earth, broken bodies, and silence. It's a graveyard for the living. And in it, Judah finds the last fragments of his past, waiting in sorrow and shadows. Wyler understood that space tells story. And nowhere is that more true than in the crucifixion scene. Set on a wind-swept hill, with storm clouds brewing, the execution site is both physically real and spiritually elevated. The sky turns black. The wind howls. Rain falls like judgment. The use of natural light, or the suggestion of it, is masterful. Faces are half-lit, half-lost in shadow. The crucifixion isn't just the death of a man. It's the culmination of everything Ben-Hur has been building toward. In this final setting, where empire meets eternity, Wyler brings his visual language to its most sublime. The wooden cross, the trembling earth, the crowd's silence, it is cinematic reverence in its purest form. And when the miracle comes, when Judah's mother and sister are healed, the film doesn't need spectacle. It uses light. Not lightning. Not beams from the sky. Just soft, warm, healing light washing over the leper's skin, revealing the miracle through simple, quiet revelation. The setting, the hillside, the darkened sky giving way to morning, becomes a vessel for grace. No words are spoken. They're not needed. The setting says everything. All throughout Ben-Hur, the settings and visual choices are not decoration. They are destiny. Surtees's cinematography, combined with Wyler's direction, gives us a film where the camera never intrudes, yet never disengages. The chariot race, for example, uses wide establishing shots to frame the grandeur, intercut with rapid close-ups to convey tension. There's a constant dialogue between scope and intimacy, between the mythic and the human. And every location supports this dance. Even in quieter scenes, like Esther and Judah's conversations, the use of framing is deliberate. Doorways become symbolic portals. Light falls across faces in ways that mirror emotional clarity or confusion. When Judah speaks of vengeance, he is often shot in profile, hard-edged, his face half in shadow. When he begins to forgive, the light returns, the camera softens, his face opens. And finally, there's the score. Miklos Rasha's thunderous, tender, aching score. Rasha doesn't just compose for scenes. He composes for settings. Each location has a musical identity. The marketplace has its flutes. The galley its warlike drums. The leper valley has silence. And the crucifixion? A single, sustained tone of sorrow, hovering over the frame like mourning itself. Ben-Hur is remembered for its story, for its performances, for its impact. But it endures because of its world. A world made real through stone and sand, light and shadow. A world where every wall has a history, every valley a voice. A world so textured, so lived in, that even now, over 60 years later, it feels closer to legend than celluloid. Because in Ben-Hur, the settings don't just support the journey. They are the journey. And in every brick, every frame, every sliver of sunlight or storm cloud, you feel it. A world not built for show, but for truth. There are productions where everything runs smoothly, as if the universe itself aligns to see the story born with ease and elegance. And then there is Ben-Hur, not a production, but a storm. A cinematic leviathan summoned forth from ambition, desperation, and sheer willpower. Its behind-the-scenes story isn't just a peek into Hollywood's golden age. It's a saga of dust and discipline, of chaos wrapped in tunics and crowned in laurel, of actors and artisans working under the sweltering Roman sun to resurrect a world that had been buried for 2,000 years. Behind the towering columns, the thunder of hooves, and the sacred hush of miracles, lay a set constantly teetering between disaster and brilliance. Yet out of that beautiful mess rose one of the greatest epics ever put to film. It began, strangely enough, with fear. MGM was on the brink of collapse. The studio had fallen from its once mighty perch, weighed down by flops and facing bankruptcy. The decision to produce Ben-Hur wasn't just artistic, it was survival. Executives called it their Hail Mary, and when they handed the script to William Wyler, they handed him their last hope. Wyler, known for his steely perfectionism and a stubborn streak that could crack mountains, took one look at the scope of the project and agreed. But he didn't smile when he signed on. He braced himself. Cinecittà Studios in Rome became the production's home, a place steeped in history and echoing with the ghosts of Italian cinema. But Ben-Hur would soon become its most ambitious tenant. Over 1,000 crew members swarmed the site daily. More than 300 sets were constructed, from ancient Judean palaces to dusty slums, from Roman Senate halls to the colossal chariot arena. Artisans carved stone facades with hands that trembled from fatigue, working day and night. The set builders didn't just recreate Jerusalem, they resurrected it. But the real heartbeat of the production was the cast and crew, an ensemble of dreamers, professionals, eccentrics, and jokers, all trying to survive the colossal machine they'd been swallowed into. Charlton Heston, cast as Judah Ben-Hur, was the production's anchor. Tall, muscular, with that unmistakable cinematic gravity in his voice, he became the embodiment of stoic strength. But Heston wasn't just a performer, he was a partner in the madness. Every morning he arrived on set early, coffee in hand, slipping into sandals and robes before most of the crew had even rubbed the sleep from their eyes. He trained relentlessly for the chariot scenes, even when production delays meant weeks of extra practice. In one of the production diaries, it's noted that he once spent 10 hours driving horses in a circle just to perfect a single maneuver. He tore up his hands, bruised his ribs, and learned to command 4 stallions with little more than posture and grit. One day, a horse broke loose mid-rehearsal and nearly dragged Heston into a pillar. He dusted himself off, grinned, and asked if anyone got it on camera. Stephen Boyd, who played the brooding and ruthless Messala, was Heston's opposite in personality. Flamboyant, lively, full of jokes. Off-camera, the two actors formed an easy bond despite their on-screen rivalry. During long hours on set, Boyd would tease Heston about his American stoicism, often mimicking him in an exaggerated, baritone drawl. Heston took it in stride, occasionally chasing Boyd through the costume department with a foam Roman sword. Their off-screen friendship made their on-screen animosity crackle with authenticity, tension laced with memory, rage built from former affection. The chariot race, the crown jewel of the film, became its own living nightmare. It took over 5 weeks to shoot. The arena, one of the largest ever constructed for a film, was a beast. Crews fought windstorms that sent sand flying into cameras. Horses balked in the heat, spooked by the echoing roar of the stands, even though those stands were mostly filled with cardboard cutouts and mannequins, painted meticulously to resemble cheering crowds. From a distance they worked. Up close, they looked like statues with sunburns. The real stars of the race were the stuntmen. Joe Cannett, doubling for Heston, performed the film's most heart-stopping moment, the infamous chariot flip. The accident wasn't scripted. During one take, his chariot hit a bump, launched into the air, and Cannett was hurled across the front rigging. Miraculously, he landed between the horses and clung on. The crew held their breath. Wyler shouted to keep rolling. The footage made it into the final cut. Joe walked away with a bruised chin. His father, Yakima Cannett, the film's legendary stunt coordinator, reportedly slapped him on the back and said, "Now that's how you make history." Wyler himself was a force to behold. He didn't shout often. But when he did, the entire lot held its breath. He was precise to the point of madness. One background scene of people walking through a market took 32 takes because Wyler didn't like the way a basket vendor handed a customer a figure. "Too fast," he said. "It looks rehearsed." He had actors run scenes with no dialogue just to see how they moved, how their bodies told the story when their voices didn't. In the evenings, after long days in the sun and dust, the cast and crew would gather outside Cinecittà's makeshift cantina. They'd eat, drink, laugh, argue about scene blocking. One night, a group of Roman musicians serenaded the crew under string lights. Stephen Boyd danced with an extra in full Roman armor. Heston raised a glass and toasted the chariot horses. Wyler clapped along, half smiling. By the time filming wrapped, the production had taken 18 months. Thousands of costumes. Millions of feet of film. Countless sleepless nights. Wyler had lost weight. Heston had gained scars. The crew, some of whom had begun the project uncertain of its worth, now walked away believing they had made something eternal. Ben-Hur wasn't just filmed. It was survived. And from that survival came art. Cemented in sweat, built on friendship, mended through madness. Behind every perfect frame lies a story that almost broke and yet held together, by grit, by grace, and by the unshakable belief that some stories are worth everything. Even the blood. Even the tears. Especially the tears. In a world of swords and sandals, of Roman columns and chariot wheels, Ben-Hur could have simply settled for grandeur. It had the scale, the pageantry, the thunder of horse hooves tearing across a sunlit arena. But what set it apart, what made it sacred in the eyes of generations, isn't just its spectacle. It's what lies beneath it. Ben-Hur is a film soaked in themes that stretch beyond its biblical origins. It's about justice and betrayal, faith and fury, identity and the agonizing path to forgiveness. And through its symbols, so subtle they often whisper rather than shout, it delivers something far more profound than a revenge tale. It becomes, instead, a spiritual odyssey. At its core is one of cinema's most enduring questions. Can a man who has lost everything truly forgive the one who took it? Judah Ben-Hur begins his journey as a man bound by love, heritage, and a code of honor. His life, defined by privilege and tradition, is upended by betrayal, the false accusation, the chains, the tearing apart of his family. This betrayal doesn't just spark the plot, it ignites the film's central thematic fire, the nature of vengeance. For much of the film, Judah breathes it like air. It becomes his compass, his reason to survive. And that rage, though justified, slowly corrodes the very soul it aims to protect. That's where the first great theme rises: revenge versus redemption. In a traditional narrative, Judah might triumph through brute force, taking revenge in the arena and walking off victorious. And yes, we get that moment. The chariot race is victory. But in Ben-Hur, victory isn't the climax, it's the turning point. Because vengeance does not satisfy. It leaves Judah hollow. Messala lies broken, but Judah feels no peace. If anything, the race reveals the emptiness of what he thought he wanted. This is the brilliance of Ben-Hur's structure. It gives the audience what they think they crave, only to show that it isn't enough. That emptiness leads us to the film's second major theme: spiritual transformation. Judah's physical journey, from prince to slave, from outcast to champion, mirrors his internal journey. He begins consumed by rage. But along the way, something else begins to stir. It starts small, the act of saving Quintus Arrius instead of letting him die. It grows when he sees the suffering of others, when he meets Esther again, when he walks the valley of the lepers. And it culminates at the foot of the cross. Here, vengeance finally loses its grip. It isn't a moment of triumph. It's one of surrender. And in surrender, he is made whole. This transformation is echoed in the film's most enduring symbol, water. Water appears at pivotal moments. In the desert, when Judah collapses in chains, it is a silent figure, Jesus, who offers him water. No words are exchanged. But that act is a baptism. Not in the formal sense, but in the spiritual. It's the first time Judah receives mercy. He doesn't recognize it then. But the water plants a seed. Later, in the final act, as Christ is crucified, a storm breaks. Rain pours. It's not random. It's cleansing. It mirrors Judah's own release. As he witnesses Christ's suffering without resistance, without vengeance, he understands. The water now washes away more than dust. It washes away fury. That same storm reaches his mother and sister. And when they are healed, it is not just their leprosy that disappears, it is their shame, their fear, their isolation. Water, again, becomes rebirth. Then there is light and shadow, another symbolic language used to extraordinary effect. Throughout the film, Judah is often lit in stark contrasts. In early scenes, warm Mediterranean light frames his home, his family, his peace. But as betrayal strikes, the shadows begin to grow. In the galley, the light is minimal, often slanted, broken into shafts. It reflects the fragmentation of his identity. In Rome, he is drenched in artificial light, reflections from gold and marble, cold and calculated. Beauty without warmth. The lighting tells us what he himself has yet to understand. He does not belong here. But in the crucifixion scene, something shifts again. Natural light returns, but this time it is diffused. Gentle. Soft. After the storm, it becomes a new dawn. Judah, illuminated by it, no longer walks in shadow. The transformation is complete. Cinematographer Robert L. Surtees used light not just to capture realism, but to communicate what words couldn't. Judah's journey is told through chiaroscuro as much as it is through action. Perhaps the most underappreciated symbol in the film is silence. This is not a movie afraid of quiet. In fact, its most powerful moments often unfold in stillness. The encounter between Judah and Jesus in the desert. No music, no dialogue. Just a cup of water, a touch of compassion. The crucifixion? Not filled with screams or wailing. Instead, it is watched in awe, in silence, by a man who has fought his whole life. The contrast is deafening. In a film filled with spectacle, the moments of peace strike with thunderous weight. Silence is also used to signal the presence of the divine. Jesus is never named in the film. His face is never shown. He moves through the story like a whisper. This choice, made deliberately by Wyler, was both reverent and ingenious. It allowed Christ to be felt rather than seen. A symbol of grace, of a higher path, of the possibility of something more than retribution. By never giving him a line, the film gives him power. Another potent theme that runs like a quiet current through Ben-Hur is identity and transformation. Judah is, for much of the film, a man in exile, not just from his home, but from himself. The prince becomes a slave. The slave becomes a Roman. The Roman becomes a stranger. But with each transformation, something is gained and something is lost. His titles shift, his clothing changes, but the pain remains constant. It is not until he abandons all the identities, when he is simply Judah, stripped of all roles, that he finds peace. This speaks to the deeper human truth. Who are we when the world takes everything from us? Who are we without our names? And then there's family. Judah's love for his mother and sister isn't just sentimental. It is the thread that anchors him, even when everything else unravels. Their imprisonment, their suffering, their leprosy, these are not just events. They are metaphors for separation, for the breaking of lineage and memory. When Judah finds them again, hidden and veiled, he doesn't just find people. He finds the last surviving pieces of his former self. And when they are healed, he is healed too. Not physically, spiritually. The leper colony itself becomes a symbolic space. It is where the broken are hidden, where shame lives. It represents the exile within exile. And yet, it is here that transformation begins. Here that hope flickers. By choosing to include such a location, and giving it emotional weight, Ben-Hur reminds us that salvation often begins in the places we least expect. There is also the powerful theme of empire and resistance. Rome looms large over the film, not just as a setting, but as a character. It represents control, order, law. But it also represents violence, pride, and the suppression of identity. Messala becomes the face of Rome, charming, efficient, ruthless. His betrayal of Judah is not just personal, it is systemic. He uses power as a weapon, and he dies by it. But Rome is not demonized without nuance. Quintus Arrius, the Roman Judah saves, becomes a counterpoint. He is honorable, grateful, and fair. Through him, the film suggests that not all within the empire are corrupt. It's not about nation, it's about choice, about how individuals wield power. And finally, we must touch on faith. Ben-Hur is not a religious film in the traditional sense. It does not preach. It does not convert. But it is deeply spiritual. It treats belief as something intimate, something that grows, not from doctrine, but from experience. Judah's journey mirrors many spiritual awakenings. First, he suffers. Then he questions. Then he rages. And only when he empties himself does something new begin to fill him. It's a story that resonates across cultures, across eras. Because it is the story of the human soul learning to breathe again. In the end, Ben-Hur isn't about Rome or Jerusalem. It's about every person who has ever been wronged, who has ever held anger like a sword, who has ever stood at the edge of forgiveness and wondered if it was worth it. Its themes are universal, but never heavy-handed. Its symbols are ancient, but still pulse with life. It doesn't just ask for your attention. It asks for your reflection. And perhaps, quietly, for your grace. To witness Ben-Hur unfold is to see cinema functioning at the absolute height of its artistry, where technique isn't just in service of storytelling, but indistinguishable from it. Every shadow, every cut, every swelling note of the score is deliberate, crafted, measured not just for beauty or drama, but for weight. Ben-Hur was never a film merely content with grandeur. It was created to shake the ground beneath your feet, to fill your eyes with fire and your soul with silence. And the techniques that made that possible weren't invented overnight. They were summoned from the very edges of what cinema, in 1959, was capable of achieving. It starts, as it so often must, with the eye behind the lens. Director William Wyler, a man of precision bordering on obsession, was not one to leave the camera to chance. He worked closely with cinematographer Robert L. Surtees, whose command of light and frame helped give Ben-Hur its unmistakable visual signature. Shot in MGM's revolutionary 65mm widescreen process, MGM Camera 65, the film was built for the biggest screens possible. The resolution was sharper, the image richer. It allowed the sets, already massive, to feel limitless. Faces became landscapes. Landscapes became mythic. And audiences, used to the softer grain of standard film, felt as though they had stepped through the screen and into ancient Judea. But widescreen comes with a challenge: how to use all that space meaningfully. Surtees didn't just fill frames, he composed them. In scenes of intimate conversation, he would isolate characters on opposite ends of the frame, emphasizing distance. In The Leper Colony, he shot from a distance using long lenses, compressing the desolate landscape to make it feel suffocating. And in The Chariot Race, he let the space breathe. The wide shots of the arena gave the sequence its staggering scale, while close-ups, punctuated by rhythmic, often disorienting cuts, brought us into the chaos. Wyler famously disliked moving the camera for the sake of movement. Every pan, every dolly shot, was calculated. His belief was that the camera should observe, not intrude. This philosophy made the action scenes hit harder, because when the camera did move, it meant something. A sudden shift in perspective, a dramatic push-in on a character's face, it jolted the audience, like a breath caught in the throat.